Welcome to Merchants Lair, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, merchants. Today we're going to be tackling Chapter 2 of Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead. Architecture, my friends, is a great art based on two cosmic principles, beauty and utility. In a broader sense, these are but part of the three eternal entities, truth, love, and beauty. Truth, to the traditions of our art. Love, for our fellow man whom we are to serve. Beauty. Beauty is a compelling goddess to all artists, be it the shape of a lovely woman or of a building. Yes, in conclusion, I should like to say to you who are about to embark on upon your careers in architecture that you are now the custodians of a sacred heritage. Yes, so go forth into the world, armed with the three eternal entities, armed with courage and vision, loyal to the standards of this great school, or that this great school has represented for many years. May you all serve faithfully, neither as slaves to the past, nor as parvences who preach originality for its own sake, which attitude is only ignorant vanity. May you all have rich active years before you and leave, as you depart from this world, your mark on the sands of time. Guy Franken, and with a flourish, raising his right hand in a sweeping salute, informal, but with an air, that gay, swaggering air, which Guy Franken could always permit himself. The huge hall before him came alive in applause and approval. A sea of faces, young, perspiring, and eager, had been raised solemnly for 45 minutes to the platform where Guy Franken had held forth as the speaker to the commencement exercises at the Stanton Institute of Technology. Guy Franken, who had brought his own person from New York for the occasion. Guy Franken, of the illustrious firm Franken & Hire, Vice President of the Architects of America, member of the American Academy of Arts and Letters, member of the National Fine Arts Commission, Secretary of the Arts and Crafts League of New York, Chairman for the Society of Architectural Enlightenment of the USA, Guy Franken, Knight of the Legion of Honor of France, decorated by the government of Great Britain, Belgium, Monaco, and Siam. Guy Franken, Stanton's greatest alumnus, who had designed the famous Frink National Bank building of New York City, on top of which, 25 floors above the pavement, there burned a miniature replica of the Handren Mausoleum, a wind-blown torch made of glass, and the best electric light bulbs, or General Electric light bulbs. Guy Franken descended from the platform, fully conscious of his timing and movements. He was of medium height, and not too heavy, just with the unfortunate tendency to stoutness. Nobody he knew would give him his real age. His face bore not a wrinkle. His real age, which was 51. His face bore not a wrinkle, nor a single straight line. It was an artful composition in globes, circles, arcs, and ellipses, with bright little eyes twinkling wittily. His clothes displayed an artist's infinite attention to detail. He wished, as he descended the steps, that this were a coeducational school. The hall before him, he thought, was a splendid specimen of architecture, made a bit stuffy today by the crowd and by the neglected problem of ventilation, but its boasted green marble dados, Corinthian columns of cast iron painted gold, and garlands of gilded fruit on the wall. The pineapples, particularly, thought Guy Franken, had stood the test of time very well. It is, thought Guy Franken, touching. It was I who built this annex, and this very hall 20 years ago, and here I am. The hall was packed with bodies and faces so tightly that one could not distinguish at a glance which faces belonged to which bodies. It was like a soft, shimmering aspect made of mixed arms, shoulders, chests, and stomachs. One of the heads, pale, dark-haired, and beautiful, belonged to Peter Keating. He sat well in front, trying to keep his eyes on the platform, because he knew that many people were looking at him, and would look at him later. He did not glance back, but the consciousness of those centered glances never left him. His eyes were dark, alert, intelligent, his mouth a small upturned crescent, faintly traced, who was gentle and generous, and warm with faint promise of a smile. His head was a certain classical perfection in the shape of the skull, in the natural wave of the black ringlets about the finely hollowed temples. He held his head in a manner of one who takes his beauty for granted, but knows that others do not. He was Peter Keating, star student of Stanton, president of the student body, captain of the track team, member of the most important fraternity, voted the most popular man on campus. The crowd was there, thought Peter Keating, to see him graduate. He tried to estimate the capacity of the hall. They knew of his scholastic record, and no one could beat his record today. Oh, well, there was Shinkler. Shinkler had given him stiff competition, but he had beaten Shinkler this last year. He had worked like a dog because he had wanted to beat Shinkler. He had no rivals today. Then he felt suddenly as if something had fallen down inside his throat, to his stomach, feeling cold and empty. A blank hole, rolling down, leaving that feeling on its way. Not a thought, just a hint of a question, asking him whether he really was as great as this day would proclaim him to be. He looked at Shinkler in the crowd. He saw his yellow face and gold-rimmed glasses. He stared at Shinkler warmly, in relief, in reassurance, in gratitude. It was obvious that Shinkler could never hope to equal his appearance or ability. He had nothing to doubt. He would always beat Shinkler, and all the Shinklers of the world. He would let no one achieve what he could not. Let them all watch him. He would give them a good reason to stare. He felt the hot breaths about him, and the expectation like a tonic. It was wonderful, thought Peter Keating, to be alive. His head was beginning to reel a little, and it was a pleasant feeling. The feeling carried him, unresisting and unremembering, to the platform in front of all those faces. He stood, slender, trim, athletic, and let the deluge break upon his head. He gathered from its roar that he had graduated with honors, that the Architects Guild of America had presented him with a gold medal, and that he had been awarded the Prix de Paris by the Society of Architectural Enlightenment in the USA, a 4-year scholarship to the École des Beaux-Arts, I'm guessing is something like that, in Paris. Then he was shaking hands, scratching the perspiration off his face with the end of a rolled parchment, nodding, smiling, suffocating in his black gown, and hoping that the people would not notice his mother sobbing with her arms about him. The president of the institution shook his hand, booming, "Stanton will be proud of you, my boy." The dean shook his head, repeating, "A glorious future, a glorious future, a glorious future." Professor Peterkin shook his hand and patted his shoulder, saying, "And you'll find it absolutely essential. For example, I had the experience when I built the Peabody Post Office." Keating did not listen to the rest, though, because he had heard the story of the Peabody Post Office many times, and it was the only structure anyone had ever known Professor Peterkin to have erected before he sacrificed his practice to the responsibility of teaching. A great deal was said about Keating's final project, a palace of fine arts. For the life of him, Keating could not remember at the moment what that project was. Through all this, his eyes held the vision of Guy Franken shaking his hand. His ears held the sound of Franken's mellow voice. "As I have told you, it is still open, my boy. Of course, now that you have this scholarship, you will have to decide. A box art diploma is very important to a young man, but I should be delighted to have you in our office." The banquet of the class of 2020 was long and solemn. Keating listened to the speeches with interest. When he heard the endless sentences about young man as the hope of American architecture and the future of its golden gates, he knew that he was the hope, and his was the future. He looked at the gray-haired orators and thought about how much younger he would be when he reached their position, theirs and beyond them. Then he thought suddenly of Howard Rourke. He was surprised to find that the flash of that name in his memory A flash of that name in his memory gave him a sharp little twinge of pleasure. Before he could know why, then he remembered. Howard Rourke had been expelled this morning. He reproached himself silently. He had made a determined effort to feel sorry, but the secret glow came back. Came back whenever he thought of that expulsion. The event proved conclusively that he had been a fool to imagine Rourke as a dangerous rival. At one time he had worried about Rourke more than about Schinkler, even though Rourke was 2 years younger and one class below him. If he had ever entertained any doubt about their respective gifts, hadn't this day settled it all? And he remembered. Rourke had been very nice to him, helping him whenever he was stuck on a problem. Not stuck, really. Just didn't have the time to think it out. A plan or something. Christ, how Rourke could untangle a plan. Like pulling a string, and it was open. Well, if he could do it, well, what if he could? What did it get him? He was done for now. And knowing this, Peter Keating experienced at last the satisfying pang of sympathy for Howard Rourke. When Keating was called upon to speak, he rose confidently. He could not show that he was terrified. He had nothing to say about architecture, but he spoke, his head high as an equal among equals, just subtly different, so that no great name present could take offense. He remembered saying, "Architecture is a great art. With our eyes to the future and the reverence to the past in our hearts, of all of the crafts and the most important ones sociologically, and as the man who is an inspiration to all of us has said today, the three eternal entities are truth, love, and beauty." Then, in the corridors outside, in the noisy confusion of leave-taking, a boy had thrown an arm around Keating's shoulder and whispered, "Run home and get the soap and fish, Pete, and it's Boston for us tonight. Just our own gang. I'll pick you up in an hour," Ted Schinkler had urged. "Of course you're coming, Pete. No fun without you. And by the way, congratulations and all that sort of thing. No hard feelings. May the best man win." Keating had thrown his arms about Schinkler's shoulders. Keating's eyes had glowed with an intent kind of warmth, as if Schinkler were his most precious friend. Oh, fuck. Keating had thrown his arms about Schinkler's shoulders. Schinkler's eyes glowed with an intent kind of warmth, as if Schinkler had been his most precious friend. Keating's eyes glowed like that on everyone. He had said, "Thanks, Ted, old man. I really do feel awful about the AGA medal. I think you were the one for it, but you can never tell what possesses those old foogies." And now, Keating was on his way home, through the soft darkness, wondering how to get away from his mother for the night. His mother, he thought, had done a great deal for him. As she pointed out frequently, she was a lady, and had graduated from high school. Yet she had worked hard, had taken boarders into their home, a concession unprecedented in her family. His father owned a stationary station in Stanton. Changing times had ended the business, and a hernia had ended Peter Keating, Sr. 12 years ago. Louisa Keating had been left with the home that stood at the end of the respectable street, an annuity from the insurance kept up accurately. She had seen to that, and her son. The annuity was a modest one, but with the help of the boarders and of the tenacious purpose Miss Keating had managed. In the summer, her son helped clerking in hotels and posing for head advertisements. Her son, Miss Keating, had decided would assume his rightful place in the world, and she had clung to this as softly as inerescent as a leech. It's funny, Keating remembered. At one time he wanted to become an artist. It was his mother who had chosen a better field in which he could exercise his talent for drawing. Architecture, she had said. Such a respectable profession. Besides, you meet the best people in it. She had pushed him into this career. He had never known when or how. It's funny, thought Keating. He had not remembered that youthful ambition of his for years. It's funny that it should hurt him now to remember. Well, this was the night to remember it, and to forget it forever. Architects, he thought, always made brilliant careers. And once on top, did they ever fail? Suddenly, he recalled Henry Cameron, builder of skyscrapers 20 years ago, old drunkard with offices on some waterfront today. Peter Keating shuddered and walked faster. He wondered as he walked whether people were looking at him. He watched the rectangles of lighted windows with a curtain flutter and a head leaned out. He tried to guess whether it had leaned to watch his passing. If it hadn't, someday it would. Someday they all would. Howard Rourke was sitting on the porch steps when Keating approached the house. He was leaning against the steps, propped up with on his elbows, his long legs stretched out. A morning glory climbed over the porch pillar as a curtain between the house and the light of the lamppost. As a curtain between the house and the light of a lamppost on the corner. It was strange to see an electric globe in the air of the spring night. It made the street darker and softer. It hung alone, like a gap, and left nothing to be seen but a few branches heavy with leaves standing still at the gap's edges. The small hint became immense, as if the darkness held nothing but a flood of leaves. The mechanical ball of glass made the leaves seem more living. It took away their color, and gave the promise that in daylight they would be a brighter green than had ever existed. It took away one's sight, and left a new sense instead, neither smell nor touch, yet both, a sense of spring and space. Keating stopped when he recognized the preposterous orange hair in the darkness of the porch. He was the one person whom he had wanted to see tonight. He was glad to find Rourke alone, and a little afraid of it. "Congratulations, Peter," said Rourke. Oh, thank you." Keating was surprised to find that he felt more pleasure than from any other compliment that he had received today. He was timidly glad that Rourke approved, and he called himself inward a fool for it. "I mean, do you know, or," he added sharply, "has Mother been telling you?" "She has." "She shouldn't have." "Well, why not?" "Look, Howard, you know that I'm terribly sorry about your being." Rourke threw his head back and looked up at him. "Forget it," said Rourke. There's something I want to speak to you about, Howard. To ask your advice. Mind if I sit down?" "What is it?" Keating sat down on the steps beside him. There was no part that he could ever play in Rourke's presence. Besides, he did not feel like playing a part right now. He heard a leaf rustle in its fall to the earth. It was thin, glassy, spring sound. He knew for the moment that he held affection for Rourke, an affection that held pain, astonishment, and helplessness. "You won't think," said Keating gently, in complete sincerity, that it's awful of me to be asking about my business when you have just been—" "I said forget about it. What is it?" "You know," said Keating honestly, and unexpectedly even of himself, I've often thought that you are crazy, but I know that you know many things about it, architecture, I mean, which those fools never knew, and I know that you love it as they never will." Well, I don't know why I should have come to you, but, Howard, I've never said this before, but, you see, I'd rather have your opinion on things than the Dean's. I'd rather follow the Dean's, but it's just that yours means more to me than to me myself. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm saying this either. Rourke turned over on his side, looked at him, and laughed. It was a young, kind, friendly laughter. A thing so rare to hear from Rourke that Keating felt as if someone had taken his hand in reassurance, and he had forgotten that he had a party in Boston waiting for him. "Come on," said Rourke. You are not being afraid of me, are you? What do you want to ask me?" "It's about my scholarship." The Paris Prize I got. Yes, it's for 4 years. But on the other hand, Guy Franken offered me a job with him some time ago. Today he said it's still open, and I don't know which to take. Rourke looked at him. Rourke's fingers moved in slow rotations, beating against the steps. If you want my advice, Peter, he said at last, you've made a mistake already. By asking me. By asking anyone. Never ask people. Not about your work. Don't you know what you want? How can you stand it not to know? You see, that's what I admire about you, Howard. You've always known. Drop the compliments. But I mean it. How do you always manage to decide? How can you let others decide for you? But you see, I'm not sure, Howard. I'm not sure of myself. I don't know whether I'm as good as they all tell me I am. I wouldn't admit to anyone but you. I think it's because you're the only one so sure that I... Petey! Miss Keating's voice exploded behind them. Petey, sweetheart, what are you doing there? She stood in the doorway in her best dress of burgundy taffet, happy and angry. And here I've been sitting all alone waiting for you. What on earth are you doing on those filthy steps in your dress suit? Get up this minute. Come on in the house, boys. I've got hot chocolate and cookies ready for you. But, Mother, I wanted to speak to Howard about something important, said Keating. But he rose to his feet. She seemed not to have heard. She walked into the house, and Keating followed. Rourke looked after them, shrugged, rose, and went in also. Miss Keating settled down in an armchair, her stiff skirt crackling. Well, she asked, what were you two discussing out there? Keating fingered an ashtray, picked up a matchbox and dropped it and ignored her, turning to Rourke. Look, Howard. Drop the pose, he said, his voice high. Shall I junk the scholarship and go to work, or let Franklin wait and grab the box arts to impress the yokels? What do you think? Something was gone now. The one moment was lost. Now, Petey, let me get this straight, began Miss Keating. Oh, wait a minute, Mother. Howard, I've got to weigh in carefully. It isn't everyone who gets this scholarship. You're pretty good at when you rate that. A course at Box Arts, you know how important. A course at Box Arts. You know how important that is. I don't, said Rourke. Oh, hell, I know your crazy ideas, but I'm speaking practically. For a man in my position, ideals aside for the moment, is it certainly you don't want my advice, said Rourke. Of course I do. I'm asking you. But Keating could never be the same when he had an audience. Any audience. Something was gone. He did not know it, but he felt that Rourke knew. Rourke's eyes made him uncomfortable, and that made him angry. You want to practice architecture, snapped Keating. Not talk about it? Okay, I want to practice architecture, snapped Keating. Not talk about it. Gives me a great prestige, an old école. Puts you above the ranks and file you as file of the ex-plumbers who think that they can build. On the other hand, an opening with Franklin, Guy Franklin himself offering it? Rourke turned away. How many boys will match that? Keating went on blindly. A year from now, they'll be boasting they're working for Smith or Jones if they find work at all, while I'll be with Franklin and higher. You're quite right, Peter, said Miss Keating, rising. On a question like that, you don't want to consult your mother? It's too important. I'll leave you to settle it with Mr. Rourke. He looked at his mother. He did not want to hear what her thoughts on this were. He knew that his only chance to decide was to make the decision before he heard her. She had stopped, looking at him, ready to turn and leave the room. He knew it was not a pose. She would leave if he wished. He wanted her to go. He wanted it desperately. He said, Why, Mother, how can you say that? Of course I want your opinion. What do you think? She ignored the raw irritation in his voice. Petey, I never think anything. It's up to you. It's always been up to you. Well, he began hesitating, watching her. If I go to Box Arts... Fine, said Miss Keating. Go to Box Arts. It's a grand place, a whole ocean away from your home. Of course, if you go, Mr. Francon will take someone else. People will talk about that. Everybody knows that Mr. Francon picks out the best boys from Stanton every year for his office. I wonder how it will look if some other boy gets the job. I guess it doesn't matter. What will people say? Nothing much, I guess. Only that the other boy was the best man of his class. I guess he'll take Shinkler. No, he gulped furiously. Not Shinkler. Yes, she said sweetly. Shinkler. But why would you care what other people will say? All you have to do is please yourself. And you think that Francon... Why would I think of Francon? It's nothing to me. Mother, do you want me to take the job with Francon? I don't want anything, Petey. You're the boss. He wondered whether he really liked his mother. But she was his mother, and this fact was recognized by everybody as meaning automatically that he loved her. And so he took for granted that whatever he felt for her was love. He did not know whether there was a reason he should respect her judgment. She was his mother. This was supposed to take the place of reasons. Of course, Mother, but... Yes, I know, but... Rourke? It was a plea for help. Rourke was there, on a davenport in the corner, half lying, sprawling limply like a kitten, and it often astonished Keating. He had seen Rourke moving with soundless tension, the control, the precision of a cat. He had seen him relaxed like a cat, in shapeless ease, as if his body had not a single solid bone. Rourke glanced up at him. He said, Peter, you know how I feel about either one of your opportunities. Take your choice of the lesser evils. What will you learn at box arts? Only more Renaissance palaces and operette settings? They'll kill everything you might have in you. You would do good work, once in a while, when somebody lets you. If you really want to learn, go work. Francon is a bastard and a fool, but you'll be building. It will prepare you for going on your own, and that much sooner. For going on your own that much sooner. Fair enough. Even Mr. Rourke can talk sense sometimes, Miss Keating said, even if he does talk like a truck driver. Do you really think that I do good work? Keating looked at him as if his eyes still held the reflection of the one sentence and nothing else. Occasionally, but not often, Rourke said. Now that's all settled, began Miss Keating. I'll have to think it over, Mother. Now that that's all settled, how about the hot chocolate? I have it out for you in a jiffy. She smiled at her son, an innocent smile that declared her obedience and gratitude. She rustled out of the room. Keating paced nervously, stopped, lighted a cigarette, stood spitting the smoke off in short jerks, then looked at Rourke. What are you going to do now, Howard? I? Very thoughtless of me. I know. I'm going on like that about myself. Mother means well, but she drives me crazy. Well, to hell with that. What are you going to do? I'm going to New York. Oh, swell. To get a job? To get a job. In architecture? In architecture, Peter. That's grand. I'm glad. Got any definite prospects? I'm going to work for Henry Cameron. Oh, no, Howard. Rourke smiled slowly, the corners of his mouth sharp, and said nothing. Oh, no, Howard. Yes. But he's nothing. Nobody anymore. Oh, I know he has a name, but he's done for. He never gets any important buildings, and he hasn't gotten any in years. They say he's got a dump for an office. What kind of future will you get out of him? What will you learn? Nothing. Not much. Only how to build. For God's sakes, you can't go on like that, deliberately ruining yourself. I thought you'd learn something today. I have. Look, Howard, if it's because you think that no one else will have you now, no one better, why, I'll help you. I'll work old Francon, and I'll get connections, and... Thank you, Peter, but it won't be necessary. It's settled. What did he say? Who? Cameron? I've never met him. Then a horn screamed outside. Keating remembered, started off to change his clothes, collided with his mother at the door, knocking a cup off her loaded tray. Petey! Never mind, Mother. He seized her elbows. I'm in a hurry, sweetheart. I've got a party with the boys. Now, don't say anything. I won't be late. And look, we'll celebrate my going to Francon and higher. He kissed her impulsively with a gay exuberance that it made him irresistible at times. He flew out of the room, up the stairs. Miss Keating shook her head, flustered, reproved, and happy. In his room, while flinging clothes in all directions, fire he would send to New York. That particular subject had not been in his mind all day, but it came to him with a sense of desperate urgency. He wanted to send that wire now at once. He scribbled down on a piece of paper, "Katie, dearest, coming New York job, Franken, love ever, Peter." That night, Keating raced towards Boston, wedged between two boys, the wind and road whistling past him. He thought that the world was opening up to him now, like the darkness fleeing before the bobbing headlights. He was free. He was ready. In a few years, so very soon, for time did not exist in the speed of that car, his name would ring like a horn, ripping people out of sleep. He was ready to do great things, magnificent things, things unsurpassed in, well, oh hell, in architecture. Alrighty. That there is chapter 2. We've met Peter Keating, I wouldn't say antagonist, but he's definitely an opposition to Rourke's mentality. I myself kind of have had the feeling of Peter Keating in the past, but I hope that in the future that I can find my way to being more like Howard Rourke. He's a very admirable person, someone that maybe not idolized, but that should be looked at with respect, and I think that people these days should look on him as a more vivid example of how we should live as people, especially in this day and age where we are constantly fighting against the societal norms and the expectations of people. If you at all have ever felt like you were in Keating's position, perhaps you should pick up this book and knock it out. You know, maybe look into Ayn Rand a little bit more, or objectivism. Like I said in my last video, Rucka Ali, another YouTuber, is actually the person who turned me on to Rand, and he has on one of his channels a series called How to Live Sober. The name is a little bit testy because he is directing his message at people who are struggling with sobriety, struggling with being able to find themselves happy in a state that doesn't require drugs or external influence. If you happen to get this far, I really hope that you check that out, and I really hope that this turns you on to possibly reading The Fountainhead or another Ayn Rand novel. I appreciate you watching or listening more off. Have a good day, and thank you for joining us here at Merchant's Lair. See you guys later. Bye.